This is NTV at 1. My name is Dennis Okari, and the pictures you're seeing right there are pictures that have been captured by our journalists. The weatherman has asked residents of many sections in the country to move to higher ground. Potential floods that have pounded the country, heavy rains, large waves, strong winds offshore resulting to storms in many parts of the countries. There are deaths and their people have been displaced. We're continuing to cover this story, obviously, because the weatherman says that we're going to likely see a continuous rainfall in many parts of the country. Just trusting that you are keeping yourself safe and those around you safe. Now, let's get started with our top story this afternoon, where at least 32,000 people have been displaced by floods in Kisumu County after River Nyando burst its banks and water levels of Lake Victoria continued to increase. For 3 days now, heavy rainfalls have pounded the region, occasioning what Governor Anyang' Nyong'o has described as the most trying time of our independence history. Okusa has been out checking out the flood situation down there and now joins us live with the latest. Okusa, it's a sad situation down there, obviously, but what help is being offered to the affected so far?
Well, Dennis, as we speak, we are meant to understand that more families continue to be displaced from their homes. Actually, we just gotten information that a place called Buoye and Maenya has just suffered some displacement. Families have been forced to flee after River Luanda, which is the river you're seeing behind us here, burst its banks and displaced additional families and people. Of course, we are made to understand again that scores of families had to flee their homes last night following a heavy downpour that went on since last night up to early this morning. And the worst hit areas so far are Nyando sub-county. And again, we are also made to understand that parts of Muhoroni, where 80 acres of maize, beans and other crops have been submerged. That is 80 acres of land submerged, occasioning that destruction of crops, and of course that brings in the issue of food security. Again, we are also made to understand that lower parts of Nyakach, parts of Kisumu East around Nyalenda, and parts of Seme and Kisumu Central also have suffered devastating damages caused by the flooding waters, and a lot of families have also been displaced after their houses were submerged. And as we speak now, the county is asking for assistance from well-wishers. Governor Nyong'o there in a statement yesterday said that they are calling for humanitarian assistance. They require things like relief food to assist those who have been evacuated and are currently being accommodated in rescue centers that have been set up by the county government, of course in partnership with the national government, that is the county commissioner. They also said that they need mattresses and blankets, mosquito nets, clean drinking water, and masks and sanitizers, and of course medical supplies to assist those who are in those rescue centers. Of course, there are issues to do with health, waterborne diseases. There are those fears that waterborne diseases could escalate in these areas where they are having or where they are holding, of course, these displaced families. Also, they are, of course, asking for medical supplies to assist in terms of health. Remember, again, this is happening at a time when the COVID-19 is also causing a lot of fears in these areas, and part of the statement that was read by Governor Nyong'o there, he stated that that floods had increased the county's vulnerability, especially at this time that is the county is dealing with the prevention of the spread of COVID-19 pandemic. That is Governor Nyong'o there yesterday in a statement he issued, just trying to describe that whatever is happening now here in the county is sort of like a double tragedy, a double disaster which has never been witnessed in these areas before. Remember, these floods are caused by rivers bursting their banks, that is River Nyando, and of course we've just spoken about River Luanda. But before that, there were scores of families that had been displaced after the waters of Lake Victoria increased. This is something that has been going on since last year around October, where so thousands of families have been displaced by the increasing levels of water in Lake Victoria, like the lake reclaiming its land. That is what some scientists have described it to be. And therefore, that has now been aggravated by the current floods occasioned by the heavy downpours that are being experienced across the country. So that is the situation right now. We are made to understand that Governor Nyong'o, accompanied by the County Commissioner of Kisumu County, are set to conduct an inspection tour of the flooded areas just to get or to have a feel of what really is happening. There has been a lot of downpour, as I mentioned there before, since last night all the way up to this. Even now, as we speak, there are some drizzles and the clouds have gathered, causing more fears among families in this particular region, how it's gonna pan out if these rains don't subside any moment from now. So from here, we'll be moving to those evacuation or rescue centers if possible. We were made to understand that the roads are bad, but we will try to even reach some and just try to have a feel of how the residents there are coping. Those who are being accommodated in those rescue centers are accommodated if indeed they are observing the 1 meter distance, and of course if they have a sufficient supply of the sanitizers and masks and soap and fresh water. Dennis.
Well, very many thanks, Okusa, there. You've rightly painted the picture. It's a very terrible situation. It's an ongoing discussion online where people are talking about the trail of destruction of the flood waters in homes, in beaches, in fish landing sites, sporting facilities. Homes have been submerged as the water levels continue to rise, and the rains are still expected to continue this week. But it doesn't stop there. Heavy rains have caused havoc in various parts of the country, causing massive damage and losses. The rains have caused floods, landslides, and displacement of people. In Budalangi, flood waters have destroyed farms, roads, residential houses, and displaced more than 1,000 families.
Residents of Lamu, Tana River and Garissa counties who live in risk-prone areas have been urged to move to higher ground as Masinga, Kindaruma and Kiambere dams are all full and will spill over in the next 2 days. A team of senior government officials led by the Eastern Regional Security Committee and Disaster Management said the dams are holding millions of cubic meters of water, which pose a major risk to people living around them.
Tumeongea na Regional Commissioner upande wa Coast ili kuwaeleza kwamba kuna maji mengi ambayo yanatoka upande huu yakielekea nyanda za chini, na tumearifiwa kwamba watu wa Tana River, sehemu za Garissa wanaelezwa. Watu wa Warma wametuhakikishia na tuko na wao hapa kwamba wanaendelea kupeana habari kuhusu maji, kwa sababu kila asubuhi wanapima levels ya maji.
For the second day, families in flood-prone areas of Budalangi spent the night in the cold. More than 1,000 families were rendered homeless after flood waters submerged their homes. More than 1,000 families were rendered homeless after flood waters submerged their homes. They're now camping in schools. The affected villages include Runya, Rukala, Maumau, Mabinju, Rugunga, Lugare, Bulwani and Bukoma.
Maji imeingia kwa nyumba zetu, tumehama, hata pale tumehamia pia kuna maji. Sasa sisi tunaomba tu tuletee makapera tujengee tu ninio nyumba ndogo ndogo.
Na pia wameenda kwa watu wa karibu wamehama temporarily tukingoja maji iende chini.
In Elgeyo Marakwet and West Pokot counties, residents of Kipchumo location near the landslide hit Chesegon are still struggling to come to terms with the possibility of losing 26 people to the flash floods and landslides that hit the area. Property worth millions of shillings was also destroyed that left iconic Chesegon market known for peace building between Marakwet and Pokot communities buried under the deluge of mud. The trading center, which ordinarily hosts more than 500 people in a day, was left under rubble that stretched over 6 kilometers. The mudslides also flattened learning institutions, including Liter Girls Boarding School. According to the school administration, property worth 17 million shillings was destroyed. The government deployed Kenya Defence Forces soldiers to search for the missing as local leaders appealed for humanitarian support for the over 4,000 people displaced by the floods and mudslides.
We have nothing as Liter Girls. We are at zero. But we have hope.
We are sad for losing the school completely. But the community today have sat down and have agreed to give us a crown, a new crown, saver one.
In Samburu County, dozens of families have been rendered homeless as River Wasonyiro burst its banks, causing flooding in areas nearby. The most affected region is Uluwati in Samburu North, where 2 people were swept away by flood waters. More than 200 goats, 5 herds of cattle and an unknown number of camels were also swept away. Hotels were not spared either. Disaster management teams rescued tens of people who had been marooned by the raging waters. 11 people were evacuated using a helicopter. Residents living on the lower areas have been called upon to be extra vigilant and move to other raised places in order to avoid loss of lives and property.
And today in Samburu we had 2 incidents. One which happened last night, in which we were informed 2 people lost their lives and property. A number of livestock were swept away. And here, 3 young men were marooned by Owasso River.
The Met Department has urged the public not to ignore updates on rain patterns, saying most parts are currently receiving long rains which will continue up to May.
Now, from disaster, floods to a global pandemic, and that's the COVID-19. And yesterday, the Interior Ministry banned movement in and out of Mandera County to contain further spread of the deadly COVID-19. Now, let's get the very latest update on the containment in Mandera, and I'm now joined by Ahmed Maulid. Maulid, how are the residents receiving this news of that containment? Because Mandera now joins the other counties that are now going to be on lockdown. But I think we've missed Maulid there. We'll come back to him shortly. Let's cross now to Mombasa to still at the developing story there. We've been following for you in that particular area where the mass testing on Kenya Ports Authority's staff. And Kevin Mutai with the very latest on the ongoing exercise and what's happening there. Kevin?
Well, Okari, what we know now is that the mass testing has entered day 5 since it began on Sunday last week. And out of the 303 people who have been confirmed positive for COVID-19, 24 of them comes from the Kenya Ports Authority, out of which 14. Remember, even on that day, Okari, Sunday, we reported that 64 people had been placed in quarantine. And out of those people who had been in quarantine for all that time, 14 among them have tested positive. And these are reports that we received this morning. A total of 24 staff members at the parastatal who've tested positive. But of course, also remember the exercise is still going on, and this was escalated by the government after it deployed 1,000 testing kits that is meant to cover the parastatal. I mean, all the people at the port. Remember that was also a place that had been singled out as a hotspot for COVID-19. But of course, this is something that of course attracted the attention of the health authorities here in Mombasa, because there's also another thing that we are learning, that there's a single pattern that this virus is following here in the region, because we are being informed that it is affecting people aged between 30 and 59, and they're saying that most of the transmission is happening at the places of work or even through community transmission. So the health authorities have advanced their surveillance so as to be able to ensure that they at least trace people who had come into contact with people who had already been confirmed positive, and of course isolate them in various isolation centers here in Mombasa. We understand there are quite several of them, one of them being the Coast General Hospital with a capacity of 150 beds. I mean, that has been used since the first case of COVID-19 that was reported here in Mombasa. But what we understand is that 46 of the patients are currently at the Coast General Hospital receiving treatment. There are also others in quarantine at various facilities here in the region. But of course, also there are various concerns, Dennis, that mass testing needs to be done across the county. Remember, recently the Ministry of Health also reiterated that this virus is spreading so fast, and even in some of the places like Nyali, the Ministry of Health saying that it is one of the leading regions, areas in the county of Mombasa, followed by Mvita, and then again there are cases detected in Changamwe and even Kisauni. So mass testing is something that is also being, the conversation around that is also being a subject that is on the table, as health authorities will start focusing focusing more on even going, advancing their ways of tracing every suspected COVID-19 case here in Mombasa. So we are on standby. We'll be speaking to health authorities from the region, and of course we'll be able to get a proper story for our viewers in our subsequent bulletins. Back to you, Okari.
Well, thanks, Kevin. We'll keep following that story and, of course, what this means to a lot of the members of staff of KPA, because half of the group that plays a key role of stripping cargo are asked to go on leave, and the shifts were really, really reduced. And 58 years and above, the staff who are above that age were obviously told to go home. So we'll keep following that and to find out what happens for those who have been isolated. And still on COVID-19, let's now bring in Seth Olale from Nairobi Hospital. Seth, you've been moving around and observing quite a lot in light of what has been happening with this COVID-19, from the roadblocks and now to the hospital. What can you tell us from where you are?
From where I am, Dennis Okari, good afternoon. Though it's a chilly afternoon here in the capital, but even more importantly, I'm outside the Nairobi Hospital, which has now rolled out testing for COVID-19. This was officially published yesterday, but the exercise began today. It's going to go on from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. each and every day. And we are being told that they can test up to 80 samples in a particular given day. They also say that this particular exercise will be enhanced further in the coming days. There's an they're going to improvise the testing so that they can do over 900 tests in the coming days. But even most importantly, they say that this is after a vigorous training and collaboration by the Center of Disease Control, that is the CDC. Remember that Nairobi Hospital has also been approved by the Ministry of Health to conduct the COVID-19 testing following validation by the National Influenza Center Laboratory, that is NIC. And so they say that it will actually take less time to actually have the results of the sample, and the cost for the testing goes for 10,000 shillings, and this is being done here at the Nairobi Hospital. What you're now seeing, the tents we're seeing at the parking lot in Nairobi Hospital, each and everyone coming here to get medical attention has to go through the mandatory screening whether or not you're testing for COVID-19. And this is just in line of the safety measures that this particular facility is undertaking to ensure that its own staff, which include medics, are not infected by maybe asymptomatic persons who are just coming here for regular medical attention. And so each and everyone is required to have their temperature checked, as well as give a brief history about their travels, and especially if they went out of the country. And so it will happen from today. This is in regards to the COVID-19 test. It will happen from today, and they say that it is going to go on for the upcoming days in as far as containment of the COVID pandemic is concerned. And so remember that the current number of cases, confirmed cases in the country, stands at 303. This is according to the Ministry of Health update yesterday by the CS for Health, Mutahi Kagwe. We know that another briefing is expected in the afternoon. Whether those figures are going to rise or just remain constant, that will depend with the presser that will come up later in the afternoon from the main offices, the MOH headquarters that will be at Afya House here in the capital. Back to you, Dennis.
Well, very many thanks, Seth. Interesting to note that there's no traffic around that area. Normally and ordinarily, when people are going for the visiting hours, that area of Nairobi Hospital is normally very, very, very busy with vehicles moving in and others moving out. But just to quickly recap what Seth has mentioned, they've started their mass testing, and it's 80 samples they're taking per day, costing 10,000 per sample. So there you have it. 21 young men and women have been out into forced quarantine after they were reported to be taking part in a photo shoot. The youth were arrested near the Nakuru Golf Club in the afternoon, and according to Nakuru West Deputy County Commissioner, the young men and women were taking lewd pictures and were contravening the government directive on gatherings to curb the spread of the coronavirus. The 21 were taken to the KMTC quarantine facility in Nakuru and shall be prosecuted once they complete the 14-day isolation period. In a bid to support Kenya during this COVID-19 pandemic and in collaboration with numerous partners, the United Nations has mobilized more than 300 million shillings in funds committed to devolution support. The projects include increasing the capacity of healthcare systems, social protection, mitigating gender-based violence, support to national and county governments for business continuity and enhancement of human capital. This joint response to the COVID-19 emergency by the government of Kenya, United Nations and development partners follows the recent flash appeal made at the United Nations in Nairobi earlier this month. The flash appeal aims at mobilizing funding for the next 6 months that will be used to support public health responses that will contain the spread and impact of COVID-19 in the country. The UN has already redeployed more than 450 million shillings and over 70 staff and volunteers to support the government of Kenya in its response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, 22 minutes past the hour. We are taking a short break. I'll be back with more stories.
Maritime tips brought to you by Kenya Maritime Authority. Precautions for vessel and boat owners, operators, coxswains and passengers. Personal hygiene. Practice frequent hand hygiene, coughing and sneezing etiquette. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects and surfaces on board the boats and vessels such as steering wheel, safety or guardrails and seats. Crew members, coxswains and passengers to regularly disinfect life jackets. Practice frequent hand washing with soap. Wear a mask on board a boat or vessel. Boat owners and operators to comply with government directives on movement restrictions within counties. Kenya Maritime Authority for safe and efficient water transport.
Discovered the world-famous Molfix and saw the difference. Let's see how absorbent Molfix is. Molfix, thanks to its ultra-absorbent particles, can keep more liquid than the other diaper brand, so you can use it comfortably all day long. All babies deserve a high-quality diaper. You should also try Molfix.
Mwalimu Plus app is the intelligent e-tutor enabling learning with high-quality digital content, and it's the best to support your child's most productive struggle. Mwalimu Plus app is good with interactive problem solving for students to solve. The system guides students while they work through the problems.
The app is free for class 4 and 6 and class 3, 5, 7 and 8 pay 50% or pay just 5 bob a day. Download the Mwalimu Plus app on Google Play, register and watch your child's performance improve.
Welcome back. As Kenyans continue celebrating all health service providers across the country for being on the front line of the battle against the coronavirus pandemic, a lot of medics in various hospitals have raised concerns over inadequate protective equipment. In Migori, PPEs worth 8 million shillings has been acquired and will be distributed to the health workers in the county.
Well, since the first case of COVID-19 was reported here in the country, we've had medics from different counties questioning the level of preparedness and also complaining about lack of PPEs that is exposing them to the virus. But it is a sigh of relief to Migori County healthcare providers after Luala Community Health Alliance chipped in donating PPEs and non-funds. Like soldiers who protect boundaries of countries, doctors and other health workers in Kenya have moved to battle zones to defeat an invisible but lethal enemy, COVID-19. And now Migori County has received personal protective equipment worth 8 million shillings. The PPEs include headgears, disposable guns, gumboots, thermometer guns, face masks, gloves, hand washing gel, among other equipment used for handling a coronavirus patient.
Having PPEs, at least at that point in time, there'll be some kind of safe. But of course, safety begins with you and me. You may have the PPE, not use it rightly, not cleanse as required. So as much as we've done our part to let them have the gadgets for protection, but everybody else, the health workers and the community, it is their own responsibility to actually keep safe. Follow the Ministry of Health guidelines.
The equipment are going to help us or safeguard, first of all, our frontline soldiers, who are the medical staff. In addition to that, we have vulnerable members of the society. We need to protect them.
We have also supported preparedness and screening in all health centers in Rongo sub-county.
According to medics, the personal protective equipment and non-pharmaceutical will strengthen the response to COVID-19 and ensure that frontline health workers are protected.
Because at the frontline, we don't even want to close the facilities. For example, like we want, actually our anticipation is if you could have zero infection, especially for the providers, because you don't want to get into a situation where the provider is infected, then at least now we can even close the facilities. So I think it is already something which is happening, and we are very much glad.
With the PPEs, no worry, no panic. We will ensure that everything is put in place so that we protect ourselves, and patients are also able to get the quality of care which they deserve.
And now surveillance has been intensified along all Migori County's entry points as more infrared thermometers have been acquired. Bernard Ojwang, NTV.
Well, in that story, they are obviously the healthcare workers are the last line of defense in this COVID-19 pandemic, and they're the ones who are sacrificing a lot to take care of all of us as we stay home and others work from home. And like my boss, Manuel Juma, normally says, surely the government needs to do something and just give them all the support that they require. Let's move on now further afield. Africans in Guangzhou, southern China's largest city, say they've become targets of suspicion and subjected to forced evictions, arbitrary quarantines and mass coronavirus testing as Beijing steps up its fight against imported infections. The African Union on Saturday expressed its extreme concern about the situation in Guangzhou and called on Beijing to take immediate corrective measures.
Look at everybody outside.
African residents living in Ganzhou say they have suffered forced evictions, arbitrary quarantine, mass coronavirus tests, and face discrimination in restaurants and hotels. Mohammed, 25 years of age, is a Guinean student in Ganzhou and says Africans are still being treated differently, even if they have been given a clean bill of health from local authorities.
Those people, like the management or your landlord call you telling you, like, after this contract, we cannot give you any contract. You have to leave the house. Tell them why. They say, no, it's the government who give them like that pressure to not let the black people leave to their houses.
Local authorities in Ganzhou, a city of 15 million, said at least 8 people diagnosed with coronavirus had spent time in the city's Yeshu district, known as Little Africa. 5 were Nigerian nationals who sparked widespread anger after reports surfaced that they had broken a mandatory quarantine and been to 8 restaurants and other public places instead of staying home. On Sunday, as international pressure mounted, the Foreign Ministry in Beijing issued a statement saying the country attached great importance to the life and health of foreign nationals and rejected all racist and discriminatory remarks. The U.S. fast food chain McDonald's apologized after a sign in one of its restaurants in Ganzhou told black people they were banned from entering.
The problem is not the paper, it's the people mind. Because when you go out, before showing the paper, when someone see you, he will run away from you. So that one will make you feel uncomfortable. Even since you have finished the quarantine, you are not going out, you are still in the houses. Because even you go out from your gate, you find some Chinese or some friend, they will run away from you like you have some problem, you know.
The Africa Union on Saturday expressed its extreme concern about the situation in Ganzhou and called on Beijing to take immediate corrective measures. The controversy coincides with the Chinese charm offensive in Africa. Diplomats said around 20 African countries are drawing up a joint letter to Beijing to say that mass virus testings and quarantines imposed specifically on Africans amount to racism.
Vietnam, which is a long and porous border with China, has eased some of the restrictions it imposed in containing the coronavirus. The Southeast Asian nations recorded just 268 virus cases and 0 deaths, with both local and foreign authorities lauding the efforts the country used in taming COVID-19. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization Director General says the COVID-19 virus will be here for a long time.
Communist Vietnam is slowing down on stringent measures, including social distancing, earlier imposed as a result of the outbreak of the pandemic. Official tallies indicate that the Southeast Asian nation has recorded just 268 virus cases and 0 deaths, despite a long and porous border with hotspot China. Experts attribute the success in containing the pandemic to a decisive response involving mass quarantines and expansive contact tracing during the initial stages of the pandemic. However, numbers tested for COVID-19 in the country are relatively low, with experts cautioning the Health Ministry's sole source for relaying the figures. Vietnam was one of the first nations to ban flights to and from mainland China in early February, when it had barely more than a dozen cases. All villages with a population of 10,000 people close to the nation's capital were placed under quarantine. There are now almost no international flights arriving into Vietnam, and the country has been under partial lockdown since the beginning of April. The government has stated that some shops and services will be allowed to reopen in the capital, although the streets were still fairly quiet. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom is now warning that the pandemic will not end soon.
Looking back, I think we declared the emergency at the right time, and when the world had enough time to respond, when the rest of the world had enough time to respond. I repeat again, there were only 82 cases and no deaths. That was enough to cut it from the bud.
WHO says resuming large sporting events that involve mass gatherings is going to require some very careful planning.
Well, speaking of sporting events, we want to cross over now to look at all the sports activities globally, and we start from here in the country, where the Football Kenya Federation is staring at possible sanctions from FIFA, unless it does the unlikely, that is, pay former national team coach Adel Amruche over 100 million shillings by end of day today. Amruche was appointed Stars coach and let go within former FKF President Sam Nyamwea's tenure. The Algerian took his case all the way to the Court of Arbitration for Sport and won compensation for wrongful dismissal. Well, the Champions League and Europa League look increasingly likely to be played exclusively in August after more talks about the remainder of the current season on Wednesday. UEFA told the 55 associations on Tuesday there was still the possibility of the competitions being played throughout June, July and August. But it's understood the latest discussions revolved almost exclusively around a plan to complete the domestic leagues by 31st July, with European competitions following after that, and nothing definitive has been agreed, but UEFA is keen to leave all options on the table for as long as possible, given the general uncertainty across Europe and in the knowledge there is no guarantee the season will be finished. A Saudi-backed takeover of Newcastle United appears to be nearing completion at a time when the rest of the football industry is on its knees due to the economic crisis caused by coronavirus pandemic. For Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, which is led by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the crisis presents a commercial opportunity and a chance to break into the lucrative Premier League. Phil Neville is to leave his role as the England women's football team head coach next summer. The 43-year-old was appointed in January 2018 on a contract until the summer of 2021. He led the Lioness to a fourth-place finish at the World Cup in 2019. But since last year's quarter-final win over Norway, they have lost 7 of 11 games. And lastly, Rapid Vienna have trained for the first time since the coronavirus forced suspension of the Austrian Bundesliga. The team is third in the league and there are 10 rounds of matches remaining in the season, which could resume as early as mid-May. LASK Linz are 3 points ahead of RB Salzburg, who have won the last 6 league titles. Well, that's all we had for you. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great afternoon. Remember, we have our subsequent bulletins at 4, 7, and 9, where we'll keep updating you following the recent floodings and obviously COVID-19, where we are in the country. My name is Dennis Okari. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.